Should Christians vote? And if so, which candidate should they vote for? With election day fast approaching, these are questions many believers are grappling with. While the Bible doesn't specifically address voting, it provides clear principles that can guide us in making informed choices that reflect our faith. In this video, I'll not only discuss biblical guidelines Christians can follow when voting, but also take a closer look at key policies from both the Republican and Democrat parties that directly impact Christian voters, whether it's issues like abortion, religious freedom, or family matters. Understanding where each party stands on these issues can help you make a decision that aligns with your faith and biblical values. But before I get into all that, if you're new to my channel, my name is Greg Sarita. I make Christian videos discussing Bible prophecy, Bible questions answered, and Bible doctrine, to name a few. So if you'd like to learn more about the Bible, make sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you get notified of my future uploads. When deciding to vote, always use the Bible as your guide. Don't just vote for someone because your friends and family are voting for them, or they're charismatic, or give good speeches. Instead, use biblical principles. And what I mean by that is, do they endorse policies that are in line with your faith and will improve the quality of your life? If so, that's probably a good candidate to vote for. Otherwise, you should probably avoid them. Also, no candidate or political party is going to be perfect. Only God is perfect. Deuteronomy chapter 32 verse 4 tells us, He is the rock. His work is perfect, for all His ways are justice, a God of truth, and without injustice, righteous and upright is He. I say this to say that if you choose to vote, don't expect the candidate you're voting for to be perfect and completely in line with all of your views and convictions. But if their policies closely align with your faith and, more importantly, don't conflict with it, then it may be safe to vote for them. Voting can be a way for Christians to help preserve moral values in society, fulfilling Jesus' words in Matthew chapter 5 verse 13. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing, but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. In biblical times, they didn't have refrigerators like we do today, so to preserve foods and keep them from decaying, especially meats and fish, they would use salt. Jesus used salt as a metaphor to show that Christians are meant to preserve godly values and moral standards in society, preventing spiritual and moral decay. When Christians vote for a candidate or political party that promotes biblical values, we help accomplish this. Now I want to talk about some of the issues Republicans and Democrats have taken sides on that affect Christians. Let's start with the issue of crime. God told the Israelites in Jeremiah chapter 29 verse 7, "And seek the peace of the city where I have caused you to be carried away captive, and pray to the Lord for it, for in its peace you will have peace." God wants us to seek the peace of the city in which we live. Along with prayer, voting is a way to engage in decisions that promote the well-being of our communities. Therefore, it's vital to vote for candidates or political parties that have proven policies to maintain law and order. The Republican Party generally emphasizes a tough-on-crime approach, advocating for stricter law enforcement, longer sentences, and a stronger stance on supporting police officers. They often focus on law and order, prioritizing measures to reduce crime rates through increased funding for police and harsher penalties for offenders. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, tends to focus more on criminal justice reform, advocating for policies that address systematic inequalities, police reform, and rehabilitation over punitive measures. They emphasize reducing mass incarceration, eliminating mandatory minimum sentences for non-violent offenders, and promoting community-based solutions to crime. And that probably couldn't have been more obvious than their handling of the border crisis. It has been estimated that there are currently 11 to 12 million illegal immigrants in the United States. Granted, most illegal immigrants who come to the U.S. are honest, hardworking people in search of a better life. But there's no denying that criminals with bad intentions also make it across. For example, an online post entitled "Shocking Data Shows 15,000 Illegal Immigrants in U.S. Accused of Murder as Kamala Harris Visits Border" by the New York Post states, federal numbers released Friday show that more than 15,000 illegal immigrants currently living in the U.S. are convicted or accused of homicide, with the eye-opening figure made public as Vice President Kamala Harris traveled to the southern border to address her perceived weakness on the issue. This is a big concern for many Americans who don't want an uncontrolled influx of illegal immigrants crossing the border, not only because it leads to increased crime, but because of their impact on jobs, the housing market, and healthcare. Traditionally, Republicans emphasized stricter border security and enforcement, like building the wall and the Remain in Mexico policy, which requires asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their claims are being processed. This had some positive results. For example, during Donald Trump's presidency in 2017, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported the lowest number of border apprehensions in 46 years, with about 916,000 apprehensions. This all changed after Joe Biden, who is a Democrat, got elected into office. After becoming president, Joe Biden reversed several immigration policies implemented by the Trump administration, like building the wall and the Remain in Mexico policy, which led to a significant increase in border crossings. For instance, in 2021, there were over 1.6 million encounters at the border, the highest number in decades. This rose further to more than 2.2 million in 2022. Kamala Harris used to be highly critical of the Trump administration's efforts to build the wall. She called it a vanity project. Now, after announcing that she's running for president, Republicans accuse Kamala Harris of flip-flopping and changing her stance on the wall.
Unbelievable. When it comes down to the border wall, in 2019, she called it a medieval vanity project, and she said it was a waste of taxpayer money.
She said on The View.
Now, apparently in 2024, she vows to allocate millions of dollars to continue building the wall by supporting the border bill, her administration.
But whether or not Kamala is flip-flopping because she realizes that the majority of Americans are in favor of a border wall and increased security, there's one thing that's undeniable. Border walls work. You want proof? Look at Poland. Poland is one of the safest countries in Europe because they built a huge border wall blocking illegal migration through Belarus, while other European countries like Germany and France welcomed them with open arms, and now they have a big problem with migrant crime. Watch how Polish politician Dominik Tarczyński explains how Poland avoided Europe's illegal migrant problem.
The problem started in 2015 when migration started from Muslim countries. That's why they called me Islamophobe. It has nothing to do with Islamophobia. This is just a fact that from 2015, millions, not hundreds of thousands, millions coming to Europe were coming from Muslim countries. So that was a wave of Muslim illegal migrants. And we knew and we know that this is a hybrid war, organized by Putin through Belarus. So if someone is asking me how is it possible, it's very simple. We built the wall. That's number one. Mr. Trump was inspiration. Then very, very sad thing.
This is the $1.9 billion wall with the Belarus, like 18 meters high.
That's right.
Can you pull this wall up that they built?
That's right. So that was the first decision when the crisis started. Then, unfortunately, one of our soldiers was killed with a spear by one of illegals, and our parliament passed the law that we can use live bullets now. So if you want to come to Poland, you will be killed. I'd like to probably, some of them will watch this interview. If you don't want to be killed, do not come to Polish border. If you don't want to be pushed back, do not come to Polish border.
I'm very happy that we are on the street, not in the studio.
Yeah.
You can see and everyone can see
Japan.
Yeah, the difference. It's beautiful.
Would this look different in Paris, London, anywhere in Germany? What are your thoughts?
I think the easiest way to answer it is Eurostat is the most important when it comes to the data.
Okay.
The safest country in Europe, Poland. The lowest unemployment, Poland. The less crimes, Poland. So if you ask me about any data, we are leaders. And that is the fact. It's not my political opinion.
Yeah.
When I quote this in European Parliament, they were very unhappy. I would say to every single leftist, if you don't believe that this is war, come and see. Come and see.
Let's say I'm from Syria. I want to go through this wall. I break through the wall. What happens to me next?
You're killed. Dead.
Shot.
You will die like a dog.
It's hard to argue with that, and I can confirm that because I've been living in Poland since the end of 2010, but grew up in California, and Poland is by far safer than California.
It has been a violent weekend in Antioch with 3 shootings happening just since Friday. The latest was this morning in a strip mall parking lot. Several people were injured. KRON 4's Sarah Stinson has the story.
I heard a gunshot. I didn't think of a gunshot, but it was just a sound like that's like 6 shots.
Continuing on, remember the defund the police movement? Democrats were largely in favor of that too. But time has revealed that was highly ineffective. An online post entitled Oakland NAACP bashes defund the police movement calls for state of emergency amid crime wave states an Oakland, California black advocacy group has called for residents of its city to abandon the defund the police movement after a recent rise in violent crime. Penning a letter to city leaders last week, the Oakland branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People said the movement to defund the police has led to a heyday for criminals. Failed leadership, including the movement to defund the police, our district attorney's unwillingness to charge and prosecute people who murder and commit life-threatening serious crimes, and the proliferation of anti-police rhetoric have created a heyday for Oakland criminals. If there are no consequences for committing crime in Oakland, crime will continue to soar, the NAACP wrote. I actually lived near Oakland, and it was always known for its high crime rate, so this is not surprising at all. What do you think is going to happen when you defund the police in a high crime zone? More crime. And then there was the controversial Proposition 47, passed in Democrat-run California in 2014. This decreased the penalties of non-violent crimes like drug possession, minor theft, and shoplifting if the amount is under $950. This reform was intended to reduce the prison population and redirect savings toward mental health and drug treatment programs, K through 12 schools, and victim services, but this had significant negative consequences. Some criminals now felt emboldened to repeatedly commit crimes of theft because there was basically no consequences for their actions. If they got caught, they were soon released from custody with no threat of prison time. So crimes like retail theft and property theft skyrocketed. Criminals would shoplift in broad daylight and bash car windows in to steal their contents. It got so bad that people started leaving their car windows open so they wouldn't get smashed. Now, this doesn't mean that Republican-run states are perfect, though, because Republican-run states like Louisiana and Colorado report some of the highest crime rates in the country, which goes to show that the issue of crime is a complex one. But they're still lower than New Mexico's crime rate, which ranks number 1 as the most dangerous state in the U.S., according to Forbes. And New Mexico is a Democrat-run state. Are you in favor of a more tough-on-crime approach and building the wall? Or do you believe that decreasing penalties for nonviolent offenders and funding reform programs are the way to go? Let me know in the comments down below. The next issue I'd like to talk about is the sanctity of life. In other words, abortion. The Republican Party is pro-life when it comes to abortion, meaning they generally oppose abortion, believing that life begins at conception. They argue that the government should protect unborn life and have sought to restrict or ban abortion in many states. Sometimes they make exceptions, though, like in the case of rape, incest, or when the life of the mother is at risk. It all depends on the state because abortions are now decided by the state. And some Republican states are a little more lenient than others. For example, Louisiana has strict laws against abortion. The only exceptions are if the mother's life is at risk or if the fetus has a condition that makes it incompatible with life outside the womb. Florida, however, allows abortions up to 15 weeks of pregnancy. The Democratic Party, on the other hand, supports the right of individuals to make decisions about abortion. They emphasize reproductive rights, personal freedom, and the belief that the government should not interfere with a woman's choice to terminate a pregnancy. My body, my choice is a phrase that is often used by women in support of this view. And some Democratic states like Oregon and Vermont have no restrictions when an abortion can be performed. Abortions can legally be performed at any stage of the pregnancy. Although for ethical and medical reasons, abortions are not usually performed after the 24-week period, unless the mother's life or health is at risk. But I'm sorry, I am just going to come out and say that the Bible does not support this at all. First of all, our body is not our own, and we do not have a right to do with it as we please. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 verses 19 through 20 tells us, "Or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own, for you are bought at a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." Our body belongs to God. He has redeemed us through Jesus' sacrifice, and we are to live to glorify Him. Furthermore, the Bible places a strong emphasis on the sanctity of life. And from a biblical perspective, life is viewed as a gift from God that begins before birth. For example, God told the prophet Jeremiah, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I sanctified you. I ordained you a prophet to the nations." Notice that God recognized Jeremiah as a person even before he was born and already had a plan for his life. And of course, that's the same with us. There are no illegitimate children in the eyes of the Lord. So if you get pregnant and decide to abort your child, you are interfering with the divine will and plan for that child. Not only that, since God recognizes us as people even before we are born, abortion is murder. So if you decide to abort your child, especially if it's out of convenience, you are committing murder in the eyes of the Lord. And let's face it, that's what most cases of abortion are. They are out of convenience because people act irresponsibly and get pregnant and are afraid how that child will inconvenience their life. So instead of doing the right thing and giving birth to and raising that child, they decide to kill it. Also, the rape and incest argument is often brought up to justify the practice of abortion. But according to an online post by USA Today entitled "Rape and Incest Account for Hardly Any Abortions, so why are they now a focus?" Just 1% of women obtain an abortion because they became pregnant through rape, and less than 0.5% do so because of incest. Yet, according to NPR, more than 1 million abortions were performed in America in 2023. So the rape and incest argument is not a good justification for abortion. And personally, I don't think people should abort their children in those instances. Why punish the baby for the crimes of another person? The baby is not guilty. And if you really don't want your baby, give it up for adoption. There's plenty of loving couples out there that desire to adopt children because they can't have children of their own or for other reasons. The only true valid reasons I can see for an abortion are when the mother's life is at risk or the fetus has severe abnormalities that make survival after birth impossible. In such cases, the decision reflects compassion and care for both the mother and the unborn child. The issue of abortion is a serious issue for many Christians, including myself. I'm a father of 3 children, and I believe that if you are responsible enough to commit the act that leads to pregnancy, you should be responsible enough to give birth to and raise your children. But what do you think? Should a woman have the right to terminate her pregnancy, or is abortion murder in the eyes of the Lord? Comment down below. On to our next issue, family and marriage. Now, the Republican Party generally supports a traditional definition of marriage as a union between one man and one woman. They also advocate for a traditional understanding of gender as binary, male and female, based on biological sex at birth. So they would argue you can't change your gender based on how you feel. And the Republican Party typically opposes allowing transgender women, that is, biological males who identify as female, to compete in women's sports because it gives transgender women an unfair advantage and poses a health risk to women, especially in combat sports. And Republicans are generally critical when it comes to transgender surgery, particularly when it comes to minors. In contrast, the Democratic Party takes a more progressive stance on issues related to marriage, gender, and transgender rights. The Democratic Party strongly supports marriage equality, which includes the right of same-sex couples to marry. Unlike Republicans, Democrats generally support a more inclusive understanding of gender. They believe that gender is not strictly binary, male and female, but can be fluid based on an individual's personal identity rather than solely on biological sex at birth. Democrats support the right of individuals to transition to their identified gender, even if they are children who are like 12 or 13 years old. This includes providing them with gender health care and gender-affirming surgeries. And Democrats generally support the inclusion of transgender women in women's sports. They argue that transgender individuals should have the same rights as others to compete in accordance with their gender identity. Now, from a biblical perspective, marriage is a sacred institution ordained by God, defined as the union of one man and one woman. We see this all the way back in the book of Genesis with the marriage of Adam and Eve. Genesis chapter 2 verse 24 says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." God never gave man the right to redefine marriage, so biblically, a union of two men or two women is not a marriage. And in terms of gender, the Bible only recognizes two genders, male and female. Genesis chapter 1 verse 27 tells us, "So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. And who in their right mind thought it was a good idea to allow children as young as 12 or 13 years old to take hormones to affect their development, or even worse, get gender-affirming surgery?" These are serious, lifelong decisions that children should not be able to make on their own. They can't even drive until they're 16, get tattoos or smoke cigarettes until they're 18, or drink alcohol until they're 21 for their own safety. But they can take irreversible hormones and get life-altering surgeries before they hit puberty. That makes no sense. I understand if you're an adult and you want to transition, fine, that's your business. But children need the wisdom and guidance of mature adults when it comes to decisions like this, because they can't foresee the lifelong implications of such serious choices. Children often make decisions in the moment based on how they feel or what they think they want at that time, which is not always good. Trust me, I know. I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter is 10 years old. And if I would let them have what they wanted all the time, they would never go to school, eat sweets every meal, and play games on my smartphone all day. I would be an irresponsible parent if I did that, because that would be detrimental to their health. Often, parents are pressured into allowing their children to take hormones or get gender-affirming surgery with the claim that it's good for their mental health and well-being. In other words, if they don't get the surgery, they could become depressed or suicidal. However, an online post entitled "Transgender Interventions Harm Children" by the American College of Pediatrics states that puberty blockers may cause mental illness like depression and many other serious side effects, including osteoporosis, mood disorders, seizures, cognitive impairment, and, when combined with cross-sex hormones, sterility. Also, when girls are given testosterone to transition to males, their levels are raised 10 to 40 times higher than the normal range. These are high doses of testosterone that could lead to multiple psychiatric problems, including mania, hypomania, major depression, and psychotic symptoms. The article concludes with transgender interventions for children are experimental and dangerous. And then there's the transgender surgeries. I don't know if you've seen any pictures of these operations. I have online, and let me tell you, it's some real Frankenstein stuff. They literally butcher some of these children, leaving huge lifelong scars or just cut off body parts, and the result looks bizarre. I don't think I can show you any pictures here, but you can probably find some if you look online. But it's bad. And there's testimonies from people who did this as children or young adults and now admit it was a big mistake. They totally regret it. Just watch this clip. It's a little graphic, but some things need to be said.
I got convinced that I was a woman trapped in a man's body. I grew up in a very conservative Muslim country. I didn't feel like it was safe for me to be a gay man. I came to the United States and I stumbled across the notions that you could change your gender, but I didn't realize how severe and dramatic Simon surgery was. After everything I've been through, none of the surgeons told me I was supposed to take some kind of hormone to be healthy. I'm actually taking both estrogen and testosterone because my drive goes up through the roof. My neural depth is only 1 inch, and that makes it impossible to have candidates. I'd much rather have my back and just live my life quietly. This is not reversible. That's the message I want to put out.
That man said a very important thing at the end of that clip. This is not reversible. You have to live with the consequences of it for the rest of your life. Is this what you want for your children? Instead of helping them when they have doubts about their gender because they've been watching too much TikTok, reassure them that God created them the way they are. He didn't make a mistake, and He has a plan for their life just the way they are. What do you think? Should children be allowed to make life-changing decisions about their gender before they even hit puberty? Or is it the parents' responsibility to guide them, to help them understand their identity and God's plan for their life? Let me know in the comments down below. The next issue I'd like to talk about is religious liberty. In other words, do you have the right to practice your faith and live according to your convictions under a Republican or Democratic system? Republicans often advocate for religious liberty as a fundamental right, emphasizing the need to protect religious expressions in public spaces and institutions. Also, they generally support the idea that religious business owners should be allowed to deny services if providing those services conflicts with their faith-based beliefs. A well-known example of this is the Masterpiece Cake Shop in 2018, where a Colorado baker refused to create a wedding cake for a same-sex couple, citing his religious beliefs. He was sued, but the U.S. Supreme Court ruled in his favor. The Republican Party also advocates for the right to display religious symbols, such as the Ten Commandments or nativity scenes in public spaces, like government buildings, viewing such displays as an exercise of free speech and religious freedom. There was a recent controversy about this in Louisiana. Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed into law legislation that requires a poster-sized display of the Ten Commandments in all public classrooms, from kindergarten to state-funded universities. In an online post entitled "New Law Requires All Louisiana Public School Classrooms to Display the Ten Commandments" by the Associated Press, he was quoted as saying, "If you want to respect the rule of law, you've got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses, who got the commandments from God." Now, how does the Democratic Party differ from this? While Democrats also value religious freedom, they tend to focus on ensuring that it does not come at the expense of civil rights protections, particularly for marginalized groups like the LGBTQ+ community. So, under a democratic system, if you're a cake maker and deny a same-sex couple service, you could be charged with discrimination and also face legal consequences, including lawsuits, which could potentially bankrupt your business. And when it comes to displays of religion in public spaces, the Democratic Party places a stronger emphasis on the separation of church and state, often opposing the display of religious symbols like the Ten Commandments or nativity scenes in public spaces or government buildings. They argue that public institutions, especially schools and government offices, should remain neutral in matters of religion, to respect the diverse beliefs of all citizens. I have to admit they do have a point there. Although I am all for people learning about the Ten Commandments and God, we have to be very careful about the government's role in this. So I have kind of mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I'm proud that Louisiana decided to post the Ten Commandments in schools across the United States. On the other hand, historically, government has not had a good reputation when it comes to endorsing religion. Just look at the persecutions of the Dark Ages. The Roman Catholic Church united with the Roman Empire and European governments to enforce its dogmas, and millions of people lost their lives through religious crusades, wars, and the Inquisition. And this is going to be repeated before the second coming of Jesus. The Bible indicates that church and state will unite, and there will be a revival of religious persecution when the mark of the beast is enforced. You can read about it in the book of Revelation, chapter 13. And although I don't have time to go into all of the details about this because time is limited, you can learn about the mark of the beast and more by reading Revelation verse by verse. This is a daily devotional which takes you through the entire book of Revelation. I try to read at least one chapter a day from it. I'm about halfway through and it's really good. Get your own copy by clicking on the link in the video description. I really like the fact that the Republican Party values religious freedom, but sometimes I think they take it too far, like with Christian nationalism. Christian nationalism is a significant and growing movement within the Republican Party that openly calls for a church and state union and claims that the church should direct the government. Watch how Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert explains this.
The reason we had so many overreaching regulations in our nation is because the church complied. The church is supposed to direct the government. The government is not supposed to direct the church. That is not how our founding fathers intended it. And I'm tired of this separation of church and state junk that's not in the Constitution. It was in a stinking letter, and it means nothing like what they say it does.
This is frightening. If Christian nationalism gets their way, they could plunge us right back into the Dark Ages. So that's something to keep an eye on if you intend to vote for the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, this election. Does the possibility of Christian nationalism getting its way in the Republican Party concern you? Let me know in the comments down below. Let's discuss education a little bit. In terms of education, Republicans strongly support school choice, which allows parents to choose where to send their children, whether that be a public, private, or charter school, or even homeschooling. This includes voucher programs, tax credits, and other mechanisms that allow public funding to be used for private schooling or alternative education options. So if the public school in your town does not offer a good education, you can choose to send your kids to a private school or a charter school instead. This actually encourages competition between public schools to improve, to retain their students and funding. Democrats, on the other hand, prefer to strengthen public schools by increasing government funding to those that offer a lower quality education or in low-income areas. And they generally oppose voucher programs that divert funds from public schools to private schools or other educational models. So Democrats don't really want you to go to private schools or charter schools if the public education system doesn't suit you. And Democrats promote the teaching of LGBTQ+ issues in public schools. So in a Democrat state, if you send your child to a public school, they're likely to encounter LGBTQ+ curriculum. And if you don't like it, too bad.
It's the latest development in the showdown over Montgomery County Public Schools' inclusive curriculum. And with students returning to the classroom Monday, Thursday, these parents protesting a ruling handed down in a federal courtroom.
Well, it's very disappointing, quite honestly.
Back in May, 3 families suing MCPS over the school district's decision to add reading materials with LGBTQ themes like Pride Puppy and Uncle Bobby's Wedding. But Thursday, a judge denying an injunction, blocking their request to let their kids opt out of lessons using those books when school starts. Opponents say it violates their First Amendment right to religious freedom.
We are really fighting for the 90% of the faith community that don't have an option. The problems aren't just the books that are being read, it's that there are discussions being handled by untrained MCPS staff.
Hours before the ruling, the curriculum controversy drawing a crowd of LGBTQ advocates who agree with MCPS.
I think it's really important that everybody is included, that kids get exposure to people who are not like them.
In a statement, a rep for the school district saying MCPS remains committed to cultivating an inclusive and welcoming learning environment and creating opportunities where all students see themselves and their families in curriculum materials.
We want to just ensure that everyone feels like they belong, that they have a place, and that there's authentic representation.
We will still continue to fight for what we believe is a good middle ground, which was the opt-out option.
And this lawsuit is still ongoing. Attorneys for those families say they will make their case in the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals this fall.
Schools that teach LGBTQ plus curriculum are supposed to give parents the option to opt their children out of those lessons. But as you see, that's not always the case. So if it's important to you to have the right to choose where your child goes to school and, more importantly, what they're being taught, you need to take this into consideration. Children's minds are very impressionable, and children are also our future leaders. So what they're taught today will shape the policies of America in the future. And since we're on the subject of children, I'm helping my friend Sandra raise money to renovate a building in the Tatra Mountains in Poland for Adventist youth retreats. Sandra has been a youth volunteer for 15 years, and she dreams that Adventist youth in Poland can have a place to engage in meaningful activities, form lasting friendships, and deepen their faith. This is also important for me since I live in Poland and have 3 daughters that are involved in Pathfinders. Please consider donating to this fundraiser to help make Sandra's dream a reality. Click on the link in the video description to read all about her fundraiser and donate today. As we approach Election Day, it's vital for Christians to engage thoughtfully in the voting process. Remember, our ultimate allegiance lies with God's kingdom, and our votes should reflect biblical principles rather than mere political loyalty. While neither the Republican nor Democrat parties will fully align with our values, understanding their positions on critical issues can help you make informed choices. Now, I'm not going to tell you who I would vote for, and you don't have to tell me either. Sometimes it's best to keep these things private to avoid division. And voting is not a requirement either. As a Christian, you don't have to vote if both political parties have policies that conflict with your faith too much. But if you choose to vote, do it prayerfully and ask God for wisdom to help you make the right decision. I've done the best I can to present you with some of the major policies of the Democrat and Republican parties. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. It has been a real learning process for me. And I hope the information provided in this video will help you make the right decision this coming election for your faith, your family, and your future. Click on the screen to check out some more of my videos. I have a lot of good Christian videos, which I'm sure you'll enjoy if you liked this one. Also, please like and share this video to help spread God's word. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.